I wanted to do a quick introductory video to the material function, and this is useful, say, for when you have got what could exist as a modular piece of code which you might want to use elsewhere. So in our example here, I have a circle masking a segment, and maybe for one team I've got a health bar that is circle based, but for another team I want to mask out using a hexagon texture or a square or whatever it is, but this piece of code is principally the same in terms of driving what the percentage is. So let me copy that, and if we come to our project here and add a material function, and we call it MF, and let's just call it radial percent, and open that up. So when we first open that, all we get is an output result, and if we paste in the code that we've brought across and plug in our output result, then if you weren't wanting to change anything or define some inputs, then that could be a very basic material function. But what we can do here is let's create some function inputs so that we can pull through that scalar info. Our start angle and dynamic radial scalar parameters. So if I right click and do function input, you'll get this input node here, but one thing to bear in mind, and we're just going to be using scalars because our start angle and our dynamic radial are both scalars, but here on the left hand side you can define what those inputs are. So let's click on function input scalar and we'll call it start angle. We can define a default value in case we don't plug in a scalar value, just in the first block, so we could say 0.5, and we can plug that in to replace our start angle. Let's duplicate that, and then what I will do is I will call, that's also a scalar, but let's call it something a bit more useful. So that in effect is degrees, and we have got our default established as well, and I'll plug that in there. So if I apply and save that, then that's our little preview of our material function. We have two inputs that are both scalars with default values, exactly the same code as we had before, plugging into our output result. And then if I take that material function and drop it into our project, the naming's gone a bit awry there, don't worry about that, and let's just plug those in. So the start value was that, the degrees was dynamic radial, and then if I just plug that into here, we've in effect can negate all of that, and we've created a separate modular system. So we now have those plugged in. I can change obviously my dynamic range because we are calling that scalar. We're overriding the defaults. Let me just check those defaults have worked. Yep, there we are. But by plugging in, we are overriding those defaults. So for example, if we maybe had two segments, we could duplicate that, and let's create some new constants, because we'll just set it, we'll sort of hard code it. So for degrees we've got 0.2, let's do 0.1 on that one, and then we'll keep it with the same start angle, but then looking in our palette, we could explore using all of these blend options, but we'll just do a subtract. We could subtract one from the other, and then if we previewed that, we only see the difference of that subtraction. So it's the same function, but because we're plugging in different values, we've created a modular system for drawing the segment, but we have scalar parameters to handle what the values are that drive that instance of a material function in a material blueprint. So it can be very, very powerful, where you can build up a modular library of little functions that you can then use as a palette to create all sorts of effects and materials. Here we're using it for a widget material, but of course this could be applied to any other material domain. We're just using user interface here. So let's just tidy up that name because that's a little bit annoying. So I hope that video is of use. If so, please do like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive any updates. And thank you for your support.